Hi, today we're going to get into your product or service, but we're going to discuss being overwhelmed versus being fruitful. When you're building your product or service, the sometimes you can get overwhelmed. I know that some people have been called into business because of a job loss. Some people have been called into business because something else happened in their life. There are others who have a gift or a talent that they wanted to share with a specific audience. Well, whatever the case, you've been called into business by God, and it sometimes can be overwhelming. Um, I know that entrepreneurs try their best to get busy, and they start diving into the business, and they start diving in with a lot of work. Um, they start spending a lot of money and a lot of time, and sometimes some of that can be very, very frustrating. And after a while, with all of this work that people have to do, people can get overwhelmed. And so let's look at the characteristics of an overwhelmed person. Okay. Um, the overwhelmed person has self-made tight deadlines. The self-made tight deadlines are usually caused by some kind of pending bill or some kind of pending penalty. So they say that, oh my goodness, I got to start a business and it has to be running in 2 weeks because I owe this bill. Well, that's a difficult situation, and that person can become overwhelmed. The next thing is the overwhelmed person has lots of incomplete ideas. So, thinking is usually the first thing the overwhelmed person does. They think a lot. They think about the problems to many different solutions, and then they come up with another problem, and they come up with another solution, and they kind of spin out of control because worry gets in there. And then they try to address the worry, and then a little bit of fear sets in, and they try to address the fear. And so the mind becomes flooded with things to do. Um, the next thing is for the overwhelmed person is the list seems daunted. Uh, Lists seem daunting. And just writing things down on a list becomes harder and harder for the overwhelmed person because this list can get kind of long. And when you have a long list of things to do and you're overwhelmed, you can get caught like, oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed just looking at the list. And so that list thing can seem kind of daunting. Um, Another thing is that overwhelmed people become tired and sleepy. When you're churning over and over trying to figure out the solution, and there's a lot of things to do, that can become emotionally tiring as well as physically tiring and spiritually tiring. And so it's understandable that all of these things can weigh a person down. Um, this leads to frustration. It seems like everything is complicated and everything seems to be breaking, and just the little things are annoying once the overwhelmed person gets frustrated. And so it gets this frustration can also be vented at other people. And sometimes the frustration can be vented at God as well. And the last thing is that blame blame can come out. And if a person is overwhelmed and frustrated, then the blame can be pointed at other people, and the blame can be pointed at God. And so this is a very difficult situation um, for a person to be in. But if you're overwhelmed, just know this for real. It's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay. Um, God knows and understands that you're overwhelmed, and He has a remedy for that. Um, he's not that hard on you, and you shouldn't be that hard on you either. I'm not saying that that you shouldn't hold yourself to a standard. What I'm saying is that sometimes you're just a little bit too hard on yourself. If you couple yourself with Christ, he says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so what he's saying is, if you just connect with me, I'll be your strength, and I will be there whenever you're weak. And so he's going to walk with you on your load. Okay, let's take a look at the fruitful person. Okay, fruitful person creates realistic deadlines. The fruitful person knows that problems will happen, and they plan for those problems to happen. They allow a little bit of extra time to get that thing done. And so there are no tight deadlines. They already know that this thing is going to take a little bit longer than I think. And so let me go ahead and spend a little bit more time on this and know that when I'm finished with this piece, I'm just going to put that on the shelf and I'm going to work on something else. All right. The fruitful person also uses a wish list. Keeping track of all the work is very important. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to get accomplished, and sometimes you're going to have to prioritize that work. And so it's very important that you use a wish list versus a to-do list. This gives you permission to leave some things on the list versus you have to get all these things done. A wish list is more of the prioritized way of doing the work and just making sure that, yeah, I'll get to that later, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and work on these few items that are grouped together. Okay. The next thing that a fruitful person does is they complete small, valuable things first. Sometimes it's better to get a little bit of momentum. And when you're trying to get that momentum, doing the smallest, most valuable thing first is something that just gives you a win. A wish list helps you identify all the work that you need to do, and then you can prioritize and ask yourself, what's the easiest thing I can do right now? And then you can also ask yourself, what can I start on and work on right now that will give me the biggest bang for the buck? Once you do start working on that, work on it until you finish it. Do the small thing and work on it until you finish. This way you have that sense of accomplishment when you finish it. Okay. The person that is fruitful also gets energized. This person gets energized by small accomplishments, and the small accomplishments that you do, those small valuable things that you do, each time you finish one, you should celebrate. I mean, you should get excited. You should celebrate because it took some effort. And once you get that momentum and you do a couple of things, trust me, you're gonna be celebrating quite often. All right. The fruitful person also knows when to rest. Shutting down for the night intentionally is very, very vital. I mean, you have to get some rest. You can't work 24/7. So making sure that you're fresh and knowing that this thing can wait until tomorrow. Do as much as you possibly can today and work on some more tomorrow. And then this way you'll come in with a fresh mind. The fruitful person also accepts mistakes. In other words, mistakes don't just make the fruitful person roll over and die. Mistakes happen, and they know that mistakes do happen. And so, since they do, the fruitful person says, "Okay, I can handle the mistake. Let me go ahead and just go ahead and do that part over or redo it. That's all right. It's all right that mistakes will happen, and it doesn't hurt." Okay. As a matter of fact, you learn a lot from mistakes, don't you? Okay. And the last thing that a fruitful person does is they slow down to address the complex. Your first answer may not be the correct answer. And so when you're working on something complex, it's best to come up with a solution, start working on it one day, sleep on that, and then come back to it to see if that's the correct solution. There's been many times where I started working on something pretty complex, and when I went to sleep and I came back the next day, I had a better idea, a better approach to this complex item. And so I would say that you have to sometimes just slow down enough to be able to address the complex. All right. Um, the last thing is this is for everybody. Take frequent breaks. I mean, just take some breaks often. Just get up and walk around, play some games, do something that's different than your business, and enjoy yourself for a while. Um, and I know that you're going to get a lot of work done. Okay. So speaking of work, let's start addressing your wish list.